Hello. Good afternoon. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. I am Aziza, the founder of A Woman's Strength. How I got here is, in terms of being here with you today, is my perimenopausal journey. That's my nerves. Forgive me. However, to give you a little bit of a background of myself, education wise, I have a background in mental health, social psychology. Human relations was my emphasis of study, which is studying the behaviors of people in groups. I also have been on a 365-day gratitude journey. So I learned how to take my adversities that were negative and turn them into a positive light through a very intensive way of counseling under a Christian pastor. And when I was a Christian before we got into Islam, that offered a very good program for me to be able to do that. Also, a longtime family friend had introduced a wellness program that was available, and I was able to get certified in behavioral change and peer coaching. I also am an author. The name of the book that I wrote, it's an anthology, is Mind Over Matter. And so today we're here to talk about perimenopause and menopause, but primarily preparing for the perimenopausal journey with Chantal Blake of Honored Womb. Welcome, Chantal. And Chantal is also an author of Peaceful Periods. She has a very great background, if I may say, in the female design, because I love that term that you put in your bio. And so I kind of like been taking that as I was practicing how to introduce you and just kind of running with it. So I hope you don't mind me using that. But she has steaming therapy in both womb and perihydro expertise. And she's a practitioner, though, of the overall female design. And she has a wealth of knowledge to help us to navigate our journeys. Also, did I say that you had a background in nursing and environmentalism? If I didn't, forgive me. Okay. And she also has a background in nursing and environmentalism. So she's an overall practitioner of the female design. And with that said, warm welcome to Chantal. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Really glad to be a part of this conversation.
You're so welcome. I'm glad you were able to get on. We were all testing in the background and able to get on stream. So forgive us for our few minutes behind tardiness. I see people in the chat. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So we're going to dive right in and not take too much more of the minutes away from time. We have I have some questions written down that I wanted to ask. And so I will pull them up. But if you want to give a little bit of background about yourself, Chantal, I'm sorry, then you are more than welcome to do so.
Thank you. I think of what's of most relevant is that I've been serving women since 2019, helping them break cycles of hormonal chaos and painful periods for themselves, for their daughters, for the women in their community. So that's been the highlight of my work, is journeying with women so that they have peaceful periods and that becomes their reality. I'm also a wife of almost 20 years, a mother of three. And to be fully transparent, I don't identify as being in perimenopause just yet, but it is a journey that I walk with many women, and it's a time of our life, a season of our lives as women that merits and deserves very intentional preparation, and that's where I am a devoted student of perimenopause.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just realizing that I'm in perimenopause. It was a lot of hindsight behind what was going on. And what triggered my awareness that I'm in perimenopause is my cycle changing, skipping around, playing hopscotch. So the physiological aspect of um, my imbalance, my hormone imbalances started changing. But like I said, in hindsight, it's like, wow, I've been dealing with this for a while. It's just like I'm probably almost menopausal because the periods are doing the hopscotch. So yeah. What am I doing? I'm pulling up there. So we were going to discuss the actual physiological aspect of menopause first.
Yeah.
And so do you want to take a dive into that, or do you want
Sure.
me to refresh the question, which I
No.
still haven't found yet?
That's all right. No, we can start there. I think
Okay.
this is important for people who are just first hearing the term perimenopause, or it's still a very new term. It's really important to understand what makes the distinction between perimenopause and menopause. And so menopause is a lot easier to pinpoint and track and define. It's when you have gone an entire calendar year without a menstrual cycle at an age appropriate time. And I think that piece needs to be said because sometimes women will experience changes in their menstrual cycle will go missing. And this may happen in their 20s, it can happen in your 30s, and that does not mean you're entering early menopause. There could be factors, obviously, if you've had a hysterectomy, that can put you in early menopause for sure. But if you're noticing that you're having hot flashes or night sweats, or that your menstrual cycle is changing before you're in your 40s, don't rush to say, I'm in early menopause. Take a moment because there are other factors that can contribute to those symptoms. There are other reasons you could be having hot flashes and night sweats, for example. There could be other reasons why your cycle is changing. So we have to remember that ovulation in the female body is a very stress sensitive process. And so some women actually lose their menstrual cycle when they are grieving, right? When they are going through a time of loss. For some women, when they try on a new diet, a new lifestyle that's not meeting their nutritional needs, that can be a reason for your period going missing. It can also be caused by disordered eating, right? Having some struggles around food, changing your relationship with food. Sometimes a traumatic experience can make the period go missing. So don't be in such a rush to be like, oh, this has to be, I'm entering menopause. Just slow down because there are commonalities in your experience, but it's not definitively that unless you're at an age appropriate stage in your life. So menopause is really easy to define. Perimenopause, on the other hand, just means that journey approaching menopause. And so for many people, it's almost like a guessing game. Am I? Am I not? You have to look at where you are and what's happening. So some doctors will say that perimenopause is just that real kind of climactic point before menopause sets in. Whereas others would describe it as the 7 to 10 year journey rolling into menopause, easing into it. So it's not meant to be an abrupt, dramatic turning point, but there is a gradual process. And we have to understand that this is our design. By design, we have to go through perimenopause and menopause. Why? Because we are not designed to bear children into our elder years. Thankfully, we are not designed to carry children into those elder years. And so this is that gentle process that starts to undial our fertility, undial our peak reproducing capacity. So it starts to ease down, like imagine shifting down the gears in a manual car. You're slowing down the speed before ovulation comes to a complete halt, which is essentially the goal of menopause, to end your ovulatory years. But in that stretch of time, which is perimenopause, don't think it's over yet. You still very much could conceive. You still have fertility, like the possibility of pregnancy still exists in that journey. So that's an important thing to note. And if you're still hoping to conceive and you're in your 40s, it doesn't mean that your window of opportunity is closed either. So the two can be true at the same time. You can be fertile, wanting to conceive, but physiologically, your body can be signaling that we're getting closer to the end than the beginning of our childbearing years. And that's okay. And so, with that gradual shift, what are some of the things we could notice? You nailed the first one on the head. The menstrual cycle changes are the most common marker of the possibility of entering your perimenopausal years if it's at an age appropriate time, right? Especially if you're around 45, when menopause on average happens at around 51 for most women. It can also depend on your ethnicity. It can depend on your family history, so it's not really set in stone. And then, but what necessarily needs to happen for all of us at whatever age, as we're getting closer to whatever menopause is going to be for our personal selves and our personal journey, what we will notice is that our cycles will change. Sometimes our menstrual cycles will get closer before they get further apart.
Yeah.
And then as we get closer to menopause, you may find that you're going months at a time without a period. So you don't have that rhythmic consistency. And some women never have that rhythmic consistency. So again, there could be other factors at play. Not everyone has regular periods for different reasons. And with that change, your ovarian function is starting to decline a little bit, which means you're making less estrogen. And if you're ovulating less frequently, that means you're making less progesterone. And both of them, estrogen and progesterone, are in a constant dance with one another. So, estrogen is a hormone that helps to proliferate and grow. That's what grows the uterine lining when you are leading up to your menstrual time, when you're leading up to menstruation. Estrogen is what gives you your female characteristics, your sex characteristics, your breasts, your hips, etc. Right? The parts of the female anatomy that make us distinguished as women, but estrogen also is responsible for growing and proliferating, so building up the uterine lining in the uterus. Progesterone has an opposite effect where it keeps estrogen in check. So they kind of dance together. Progesterone keeps estrogen from going overboard and growing too much or proliferating too much. The other function that estrogen has is that estrogen is responsible for nourishing, hydrating, and lubricating tissues throughout the entire body. So, estrogen is not just here for reproducing and menstruating. All of the tissues in the body respond to estrogen, and estrogen can impact all of the tissues. And that's why we see such global changes in the female body when estrogen starts to decline. So, other than the cycle shifting, you may also notice changes in your skin quality, right?
Yes.
Changes in
Yes.
your hair.
That was a hindsight
Mm-hmm.
when yeah, definitely. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's
My skin was
changing.
so dry.
There's a suppleness that estrogen helps us to maintain. So that's definitely a factor where we might notice, drier hair, drier skin. That's something that comes up a lot. We also have a lot of estrogen receptors in our urinary tract. So if you find yourself being more prone to UTIs or incontinence, estrogen has an effect on those tissues as well as the vaginal tissues. A common complaint in menopause and perimenopause can be vaginal dryness, right? There's less hydration, there's less lubrication in the tissues. And so that can give rise to painful intercourse. It can give rise to vaginal atrophy, vaginal dryness. And so that's another way that estrogen may make a noticeable shift in the body. And then also estrogen, that decline in estrogen will also impact other organs and systems in the body. For example, when we think of our experience with hot flashes and night sweats, those are actually considered vasomotor symptoms.
That's
And so
another one
that's
for me.
so like the dilation of your your vessels, right, are impacted. And another really big thing is that even though our ovaries are functioning less and we're not making as much estrogen, we can still make estrogen. It's not like we go from 100 to zero. Even when we're not ovulating, we can still make these reproductive hormones, these sex hormones. We still make them. We just make them in different qualities because we don't need as much as we did when we were in our peak childbearing years. So we will now depend a lot more on our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands sit above our kidneys, and they help to contribute to our estrogen and progesterone production, even when we're no longer ovulating. And that can put a real strain, that can really put a lot of strain and load, right, on our kidneys that are already doing other functions. And so that's kind of why we tend to see those hot flashes and night sweats. Our kidneys help to hydrate and cool the body as well. That's like how our body maintains the appropriate temperature and hydration in the body. And so that's why it's such a common thing when we approach menopause. It's like, okay, well, we're pulling a lot more on our kidneys than we needed to before. And as such, the symptom of that tends to be the hot flashes, the night sweats, and like again, the hair and skin changes are also connected to kidney function as well.
Ah, okay. I thought for the hot flashes, I thought it was my bed, the
Oh,
type of material. I'm, this bed is just hot, you know?
no.
Yeah.
It's definitely, there's a tendency to have excess heat in the body. You know, it's just a common, it's a common imbalance. It's an imbalance that we are more prone to at this particular season. Some of the other changes women might notice might be mobility changes, and so joints, how your joints are moving, how your muscle mass, maybe a loss of muscle mass is very common as well. Sometimes weight is changing, or it's harder to lose weight, it's easier to gain weight. And, you know, fatty tissue is another source of how we make estrogen. And so it is actually, you know, no one wants to hear it, but by design, having a little bit of fat helps with your estrogen production. You know, it impacts your estrogen production as well, helps to protect your bones as well. And so when you think about elders and you know, your mobility and your vitality as an elder, being a skinny elder is not as safe for your bone health, for your physical health. You want to have some cushion, obviously not to the point that it is keeping you from being mobile, but having a little bit of fat. There's some estrogen production we get from that fatty tissue as well. So some people don't really like that part of it, but that's comes with the terrain. Obviously, you know, you can still build muscle mass, and that will help balance that weight gain and help your metabolism. Some people may also notice cognitive changes. So we talked about brain fog. we talked about
Yes,
we
that's
talked
another one.
about Instagram. You know, a little bit of brain fog or difficulty with concentration, memory changing, and I think it's really important to remember that there are really key moments in our development where there's restructuring that's happening, there's changes that are happening. So when we go from pre-puberty through puberty, our brain restructures for this stepping into adulthood. And when we go from pre-pregnancy into pregnancy and motherhood, our brain restructures us for the task of mothering, right? There's pruning that happens, there are changes to the brain that have to happen. And similarly, we can also note that the brain is restructuring and changing for we're stepping into a new phase, right? We're stepping into our wise woman years, our elder
I
years,
like
not
that
in
too. That's another term I've picked
yeah,
up.
not immediately. It's not overnight. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to have like, you know, all wisdom, you know, overnight. But consider that you're stepping into another stage of life where the way that life demanded that you function and produce and show up is going to be different, right? You're being prepared for an entirely new role. And so that can be a part of what's happening with our brain changes. But there's also some other factors that are connected to that. Like our overall tolerance for stress is going to change as well. So that can contribute to some of our psychological changes, right? If you find that you're struggling with insomnia, irritability,
Oh my goodness, yes.
mood changes, things of that nature, you have to also consider that by design, our stress hormones, especially when we have high levels of of estrogen in our body, we're able to temper a lot of stress. When you imagine how did you get through university, or demanding times in your career, or really demanding times in your family growth, if you're a mom, might be wondering, how did I survive on so little sleep? That was estrogen. That was estrogen carrying you through with those, even in spite of those stressful times. And when we have less estrogen, when we're making less of our sex hormones, we just don't tolerate stress as well. And so you may notice that your body, you just don't have the resilience towards stress that you did when you were younger, because again, you're not supposed to be moving at that full throttle,
Yes.
speed that you had been in your 20s or 30s. As you're shifting into your later 40s, your 50s, you're moving into your 60s, you're being prepared for a new pace of life. Life is demanding something different of you. So there are definitely, those are like key areas of changes you might be noticing.
Yeah. I would say, because I had my first child at 34, so very close to the perimenopausal age. Um, beginning of that age range, I should say. And before my first child, because they're a year and some months apart, I would say, oh, I work good under stress. I work good under stress. After them, I was like, if there were like family things that were being planned and everything, I would say, you know what, I just need time to process. I can only do one thing at a time. I can't think that far ahead. And I really genuinely meant that from a good space. Like I needed that for myself. I didn't need anyone to try to pivot me beyond my capacity. So yes, you're right. In hindsight, again, when I think about all of the things,
And
yeah,
estrogen is what keeps us together. It's part of what's considered our social nervous system. And so estrogen is about keeping the tribe, the family together. So by any means necessary, what needs to be done to keep everyone well, and their needs being met, and everyone fairly happy. And when we have less estrogen, there's a shift. There's like,
you
look,
don't care who's happy.
I'm not about to stress myself out. I'm
It's
not about to
about
stretch
me.
myself thin so that everybody, is
Yeah.
thriving. It's easier to be in that sacrificial kind of state when estrogen is just giving you this superpower. Like, yeah, I can
Mhm.
do it all. And then you get to a point, but I don't want to, right? When
Right.
there's a little bit less estrogen, it's like, I don't want to do it all anymore. And I'm not going to do it all anymore. And
Yeah.
those boundaries get a lot clearer
Yep.
at that time.
Even for the kids. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Okay. So I accidentally had the sound on Facebook because I realized I can only see the YouTube comments, and so hopefully I don't pull up any noise. I was just checking to see if anyone um, said any, asked anything. Not yet. Okay. And so we have that was the physiological aspect of perimenopause. And so now we have the next, which is the common symptoms and management strategies that what would you suggest? Well, first off, what are some of the common symptoms? You did touch some
Yeah.
in the physiological
Hmm.
um, section of the session. However, what are some of the common symptoms if you were just oblivious to perimenopause? Because I don't think it dawned on me. Like I said it like last week. I was like, I don't know if I could have prepared because I mean I heard of the change. That was a term that was
Mm.
used, and I might be telling my age. the change, the change, the change. And I'm like, okay, the change, but no one ever talked about what that looked like. What do you mean the change? Okay, you're going through the change. What's the change? No explanation of what that meant. Maybe a hot flash. It's like, woo, open a window, turn the fan on, but still no definitive reason why you having this experience. So if you don't mind talking a little bit about just overview, because a few more people just joined, of some of the common symptoms
Yeah.
and some of the strategies to manage them. I also have, they're not necessarily strategies, but I have some supplements that help me for my peri. I don't know if they'll help for menopause. Maybe one will. I can probably almost bet, but I can share
Mhm.
those when you're finished.
Okay. I would say usually in a clinical setting, if they see irregular cycles and hot flashes and night sweats, they will often just say, "Okay, that's it." Right? That's the piece about that's enough to say, okay, you're in perimenopause or menopause. Maybe they'll check your hormonal levels as well. And so that's something to be noted there. But I think also we need to look at the larger picture of when you can't really explain. See, the reason why I think perimenopause catches so much of us off guard is because we don't really get a healthy baseline for what a healthy menstrual cycle is to begin with. So when we find that PMS and moodiness is normalized, then it doesn't really give us a good sense of like, oh, okay, noticing that something is really off or changing. We kind of just like, oh, I'm bleeding a little bit more, or my cycle's a little bit more irregular. And we don't really hone in like, oh, okay, wait, my body might be calling my attention to something right now. And
Right.
it's really interesting because in traditional Chinese medicine they'll often say that so they liken the seasons of womanhood to actual seasons. And so if you can imagine when you're in your peak reproductive years, that would be considered the summer, right? Peak fertility. And perimenopause is considered like the autumn. It's when things are starting to shift. But within the monthly menstrual cycle, the part of your menstrual cycle that's also like summer is your ovulatory phase when you ovulate. And what follows that is the luteal phase. And the luteal phase is also seen as a time of autumn. So what happens in the luteal phase can sometimes be a mirror of what your perimenopausal journey might be like. So if you have a really hard time before your menstruation, right? If your premenstrual phase is really rocked by a lot of digestive issues, if it's really rocked by a lot of difficult moods, poor sleep, it's almost like a window into how you can better care for yourself now so that the larger autumn, which is perimenopause, is a bit smoother for you. And so some of the symptoms we've already talked about, other than hot flashes and night sweats, we talked about urogenital changes, changes in your pelvic health. So maybe more tendencies towards vaginal dryness, urinary incontinence, UTIs, um, pain with intercourse, vaginal atrophy, etc. These are also common changes. And if anyone has been following Halle Berry and her menopausal awareness, this was a big thing for her. Her doctor, she had experienced bleeding after intercourse, and I think her doctor had misdiagnosed her as having herpes. And
Yes.
it just turned out that, you know, as a maturing woman, if your vaginal walls are thinner, they're going to be more prone to bleeding, right? And so that's what was happening was that her, the vaginal dryness, vaginal atrophy was impacting her sexual health, and that was misunderstood and misdiagnosed. And so that's another challenge as well that many women might be facing. So for the hot flashes and night sweats, and it is connected with vaginal dryness too. We talked about that we're going to be depending more on our kidneys, right?
Yeah.
As we're our ovaries are making less hormones, and we're not ovulating as regularly for our progesterone production. We're depending a lot on our kidneys, and our kidneys help with hydrating. And so, in many traditional cultures where perimenopause had no stigma, it wasn't seen as something negative, right? Especially if you look in Far Eastern cultures, they didn't even have terms for like hot flashes and night sweats, because
That's
there's
what I'm
just
saying.
there's a different
Yeah.
cultural awareness around it. It's understood as like, oh, I'm about to enter my second spring. So I'm preparing now. I'm taking care of myself. I'm slowing down. I'm taking more tonics. I am practicing more self care. And so that's why menopause does not equal suffering for everyone. Perimenopause does not equal suffering for anyone, but it does require us to be more intentional about how we're caring for ourselves. And so, if those types of symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, are showing up for you, those are all of those symptoms are an invitation to take better care of your kidney, supporting your kidney function, really supporting deep hydration, cellular hydration in your body. So trace minerals, many of us don't realize how many minerals we're not getting from our foods. We don't have as rich, wholesome quality foods as we did in the past. Our soils are not as mineral and nutrient rich as they were in the past. And so some people find a lot of support with just being more intentional about including trace minerals into their diet. There was a big trend around adrenal cocktails. So these different drinks that have magnesium and cream of tartar, and there's all kinds of concoctions on the internet. But again, what's the goal? The goal is to nourish your adrenal glands, to bring more trace minerals into your body, which are going to help hydrate your cells and support your kidney function. And generally, foods that have a very cooling quality tend to be raw foods, and foods that have a lubricating quality tend to be gelatinous. So when you think about foods that are stretchy, that are slippery, they tend to be very hydrating. So you think about your okra, for example, you think about your chia seeds, your flax seeds. These foods that have this stretchy quality tend to be really lubricating for our tissues and hydrating as well. And then in general, what nourishes the kidney in Eastern medicine are activities that are slow and intentional and enjoyable. That's how you hydrate the body on an energetic level.
Absolutely.
You kind of bathe your cells in pleasure and in enjoyment and savoring, not pushing, going. I saw one of the comments here. Thank
Yes,
you
I
for the
have one pinned. I don't know if you can see it.
I
Can you
see
see
it.
it?
May you please
Okay,
talk
great.
about the relationship between perimenopause and gut health changes that are then
Yes.
experienced? I feel that it's important to understand it is, right? The quality of the substance, the quality of the fluids that we make are largely mediated by the quality of our digestion. So we talked about our body not tolerating as much stress. So when we think about all of the organs that contribute to our digestion, we're also thinking a lot about the liver, we're thinking about our gut health. And so this is a time where we really have to make sure that these organs are really well supported, or that these organ systems are really well supported. So if we can turn down some of the toxic load, or the digesting foods that we have no business eating, the processed foods, the junk foods. We're just getting to a point in our life where we have to really bring in clearer nourishment so we can make clearer and more nourishing substance, right? This is the blood, the quality of the blood that's going to nourish your brain and help with your memory and your cognition. The quality of fluids that are going to circulate and hydrate your tissues. So yeah, we have to get really real about our digestive health and our gut health. Some of the ways that we might have been eating when we're just grabbing and eating whatever on the go are not going to nourish us in the same way anymore. And so, yeah, it is common that our digestive fire or our gut health will dampen as we age. And so we have to be very conscious of how we're protecting our digestive health, how we're making sure that we have the capacity to digest really well. And that comes with eating foods that support digestive function, like your bitters, right? Bitter herbs, bitter foods have a really great support of our digestion. You think about foods like cilantro or arugula,
Arugula.
dandelion, dandelion.
Yes. Oh,
These
that's a
bitters
good one.
these bitters are really good for supporting the liver so that we digest really well. Also, really good for increasing our digestive enzymes so that, again, we're able to break down what we're eating really well. So, yeah, gut health becomes really important because that impacts the quality of substance, right? What's going to hydrate, lubricate, and nourish our whole body.
Can I share one that has been helpful?
Yeah.
Because I had a MIDI issue. I shouldn't say I had. I have a MIDI issue. From time to time, I look like bloated, and then it will go away and then come back. But um, I know probiotic is suggested. If you need one, you should, I guess, talk to your practitioner or if you need one or not. However, I don't take a probiotic because the way I eat, I kind of get it in the foods, like particularly if I eat in the morning. Date. The date helps digest a lot of your food, and it will help with that gut. You just take eat an odd number of them.
Mm,
Um, that has been helping me. It helps. You can tell the difference. I won't get too explicit,
mm,
but you can tell when you're eating them first before you eat anything else.
mm.
And I swear by those for gut
Okay.
health.
Yeah, yeah, there's some good fiber there. We have to be more intentional about our fiber intake as well. It's definitely not the time to still be eating, making it a regular habit to eat a lot of refined carbs. Our insulin resistance is changing as we get older as well. So, our body needs a lower glycemic diet for most of us going forward, for sure. So, that's really important as well. I'll come to the question in a moment. I just wanted to share some of the other symptoms. If you find that vaginal dryness, urinary tract infections, painful intercourse is showing up for you, then that's a really great time to start having self care practices that are specific to your vulval, your perineal, your pelvic health, right? So,
Like the
practice
steaming.
like vaginal steaming, like herbal soaks, herbal sitz baths, So I think because we don't get a lot of initiation and information, we're just like seeing ourselves as victims, like, okay, what do I do?
Mhm.
But traditional cultures have already known there are things, there are foods, there are practices, saunas, bathhouses, massages, like there are practices, there are wellness practices that help to
All of that.
yeah, support you in this transition. And so, yeah, with anything having to do with vaginal health or vulval, the health of your vulva, your perineum, definitely, herbal steams and soaks are really helpful in that space. And then for memory and cognitive challenges, again, if you imagine that your brain is being restructured for your wise woman years, for your elder years, there's going to be some pruning. You're not expected to function at the same multitasking, doing all the things. Like that's not sustainable into your elder years. And so if you find that you can't do but more than one thing at a time, if you find yourself that you need to do more monotasking, that is so helpful. I think it's the expectation that we need to function and do everything we did in the last decade that really messes us up, like this inability or this resistance to really let go of how we defined ourselves and saw ourselves as valuable, right? All of the things that we thought, oh, this is what makes me valuable and powerful, and knowing you have inherent value, right? There's nothing to be embarrassed of or ashamed of if you can't remember where you put the keys. It's an invitation to have more intentional systems in your life, to have more intentional practices, to do things with more presence. And so I think it's really an invitation and not a problem, but it's definitely a space where herbs are great support. Acupuncture is great support. So I would say definitely
I recommend this
ashwagandha.
ashwagandha. Oh man, it's my friend.
Hmm. Ashwagandha is a great adaptogen. It helps you to modulate stress. And this is a time where I think we need to be open to having an ecosystem of support. Don't think that your GP, your doctor, is the only person that can support you in this journey. They don't even generally have the time to
Nope.
hear all of what is ailing you and concerns you. And so think about a little bit more creatively how you can bring in an acupuncturist into your wellness care? How can you bring in an herbalist into your wellness care? A naturopathic practitioner, a functional medicine practitioner, a Ayurvedic practitioner. You know, there are many systems of health that have helped women through this transition without pharmaceuticals and without surgical intervention. And so know that these are time tested ancient systems of wellness. You're not the first, you're not going to be the last. And there are ways, and each tradition and each approach, they will have, recommended tonics, supplements, vitamins, supportive resources for you at this time. And so, definitely looking at, there are particular herbs that specifically improve cognitive function, different types of
Mhm.
mushrooms that improve
Yeah.
adaptogens. You've got, reishi, you have
Mhm.
lion's mane. There's a whole lot of them. So before you take
Good.
anything, consult with a practitioner. Not necessarily, not all doctors know how to guide you in herbal medicine, so they might be clueless, but find a qualified master herbalist, a certified herbalist, talk to an acupuncturist, a naturopath, get some resources and support, because again, that circulation, how you're supporting your digestion, how you're supporting your nervous system, all of that is all interconnected, and we're really whole beings. And then as
Mushroom coffee is a good one.
yeah, mushroom
Mhm.
coffee is coming up a lot as well for folks. There are certain herbs like maca root and vitex or
Yeah,
chasteberry. You just have to.
another big one, the mucka root.
Yep,
Mhm.
shatavari, ashwagandha, like depending on the tradition that you're consulting with, there are amazing herbs that have been serving as tonics and support for women throughout their perimenopausal and menopausal journeys. And then if weight and metabolism is a struggle for you, you definitely have to focus on lifting, building muscle mass, really being very intentional about how protein focused your meals are. A granola bar can't be a meal. Tea and toast
So
can't be a meal.
can't eat
Yeah,
that no more.
you can't eat like that anymore. Your metabolism is changing. And so meals have to be very protein focused, more higher protein meals. And then your carbs, like really limiting your processed carbs, making sure you're eating a lot of fiber. So I would say, like, I feel like perimenopause is a level up time. If you haven't leveled up yet, it's a time.
Yes,
Like my
time. Yeah,
mother-in-law always says, sometimes you got to put on your big girl panties.
and do it.
Perimenopause is a big girl panty moment. It's a time where, however, you've been neglecting yourself, however, you have not been feeding yourself well, not resting well, not caring for yourself, not honoring your needs, not finding your own joy and your own interests. This is where the buck stops. You're not gonna you're
Absolutely.
not gonna pass go if you don't, if
Yes,
you don't step
absolutely.
in. Yeah.
It's a deterrent. You can look at it like that.
And so, for the question that's coming up, what if you're not ready for premenopause because you still want to complete your family? Again, being in perimenopause is not mutually exclusive to being fertile. And so, even if you feel like your family is complete or you don't have ambitions for a family, know that even with your changing hormones, pregnancy is a possibility. Nature by design wants to keep pre coexisting, right? Pre-producing is part of our design. So the two are not mutually exclusive. And so I'd say if you are noticing that your cycle is not coming once a month, there's a longer gap in between periods, or your menstrual cycle is showing signs that it's not healthy, it's very painful, your menstrual flow is very dark, very clotted, or you're just having these very unpredictable cycles, then I would say tend to your menstrual cycle, work on the health of your menstrual cycle, because that's going to be the key to conceiving, even if you're in your 40s. But then we also have to just be very honest that there's a certain time in our lives where by design, we are not intended to still be having babies, right? There's a certain amount of energy and availability that's just not there anymore. So at some point, we do have to, grieve the loss of those years. That's fine, but also know that, be open to the possibility can still happen. So you just have to start. I think if you've never really tracked your fertility, if you've never paid close attention to your menstrual cycle, this can be also a really helpful tool in tracking where you are, what's happening with my cycle, how quickly is it shifting, what kind of shifts am I noticing, what's it telling me, and how can I be better supportive. And so in terms of what hormones to check, if you're in perimenopause, they're going to check your reproductive hormones, your estrogen levels, your progesterone levels. They may check your FSH, your LH. It just, at the same time, again, there's an age appropriateness. Don't ignore the age appropriateness of perimenopause. So if you're not in your mid 40s yet and you're experiencing some of these things, there are ways to address and kind of slow down. If you feel like you're moving towards perimenopause or menopause too early, there are ways to slow that down.
So I can answer this, Sister Chantel.
Mhm.
In your course, you talked about, she's talking to you, and you talked about cooling herbs for steaming. Are there cooling herbs for drinking, like teas? I love ginger, but that warms the body. Is that gonna make me sweat more? Ginger won't necessarily make you sweat more. It just kind of like gives you a pop, just that moment. However, aloe aloe vera is a good cooling drink. For tea, the dandelion or the milk thistle are the best.
Mint also is really
Okay,
cool.
I'm sorry. Mint is good. Well, your period, I know, and the red, what is the raspberry leaf and the mint
Mhm.
are good for your period. Yeah.
Mint is also cooling, so that's a tea that you
Okay, it's
can.
cooling. Okay.
Yeah, that's a tea that you could drink. And yeah, there are the herbs that we use for steaming you can also drink them too, right?
Oh, can you?
Yeah, there's no herb that's like you can only use for one thing and not another. You
Yeah,
know, like
yeah. I have like a
like
whole bag of that stuff.
yeah, you can drink. I mean, again, the quality of the herbs, like some people may not be as particular about their steaming herbs being organic, but maybe they might be a bit more particular about their drinking herbs being organic. So yeah, cooling herbs, when we talk about cooling herbs in the realm of steaming, these are herbs that support the kidneys and the kidney helps to cool. That's really the key thing. The key to cooling herbs are herbs that are considered yin tonics or kidney tonics. They help to cool the body. And
Okay.
so yeah, mint is a good cooling. That's an easy to access herb that you can drink. And yeah, you're going to have to be with yourself a little bit, like what's going on. Excess heat, night sweats and hot flashes can be connected to excess heat, and ginger can be very warming, but mint can be very cooling. So kind of you have to start really studying yourself because there's always going to be a tailored approach to
Yeah.
this. What's
I
going
mean,
to
I
work?
guess I didn't. I forgive me. I guess I didn't realize that ginger made you hot, like after you drink. I know when you're sipping it, it
It's
gives you.
warming.
But I drink it all the time, and I don't. I guess that's not my experience.
It may not be your experience.
Yeah.
Generally, it's warming. You give, if a person had a fever and you wanted them to break a sweat, you would give herbs like ginger. You could do a ginger bath. These are things that bring up the body's temperature and trigger sweating. So yeah,
Okay.
but sweating could have a cooling effect. It depends. You have to kind of see where you're at. What's going on with you. But yeah, mint is a pretty easy to access cooling. Well, all the symptoms stops once menopause is complete. And so if the symptom is connected to the menstrual cycle specifically, um, there are other symptoms, right? Like women who go through menopause can still deal with some of those challenges. It just depends on, you know, um, the intensity of some of them may change with time, but particularly the around the urogenital changes, you still have to care for yourself in those ways. You still have to care for your pelvic health, your urogenital health. I do know some elders that I've spoken with who have gone through menopause, and they have a very clear memory of there being a period of time where it was really challenging. And then they've also had a period of time where a lot of it lifted, the heaviness lifted. It was almost like the initiation was done or the change had commenced. So it really depends. I'd say your experience of perimenopause and menopause, it really depends on what you're bringing to the door, right? Are you bringing to the door years of neglecting yourself, ignoring your periods, hating your periods, having crazy periods and not doing anything about it, or
That's
taking
a
birth
good
control
one.
or pain medicine and not really listening to your body? If you're coming to the door of perimenopause and menopause with depletion, is not just magically going to go away, right? This is
Mhm.
the invitation now, is to start supporting, replenishing, and pouring into yourself so that even as you pass through this threshold, there's still vitality and health for you on the other side. So that's why our experiences can be so different. For some women, their periods just end and it's just no big deal. But again, what are you bringing? What are you coming with? What are you coming with? How are you starting the journey? Because if there's a lot of decades of hating your body, neglecting your body, medicating your body, then you might be set up for a bumpier ride. However, if you've been pouring into yourself, caring for yourself, then there is still vitality on the other side, even if the transition is bumpy. What about, do you want to, should I read this? What about the reduced estrogen and joint health? What can we eat or take to help with the reducing estrogen with regards to our joints? I developed arthritis in my knees when I started menopause. So when I talked to an acupuncturist, because I lead a group coaching program called Peaceful Perimenopause, and one of our guest speakers was an acupuncturist, and she said particularly when it's coming to those joint challenges that you might be facing, digestion, the quality of your nutrition, the quality of your digestion are really important here. But the other thing that can more rapidly decrease the amount of hormones you're making is stress. She said, stress is like draining the bank account of your hormones, right? So what's the invitation with when we have joint pains, we need to be mindful of how much stress is in my life, right? The figurative diet and literal diet, right? Are you eating inflammatory foods which create stress in the body? Are you living an inflammatory, stressful life? These are things we have to pay attention to for sure. Looking at the digestive piece as well is a big one. And then also, how are you leaning on? There's so many herbal allies in terms of relieving joint pain, um, and self-care practices as well. So yeah, there's a lot to look at. The goal is not just to just for some people, if you're having a really hard time, sometimes hormone replacement therapy can be a temporary support, but keep in mind that your body is still demanding that you give more care and attention to what's happening and get more curious about it. I remember again, Halle Berry was like, I'm just going to take HRT till the day I die. I'm going to just take supplementing estrogen. We don't, there's a design at play. There's a reason why our estrogen is declining. The question is, how are you adjusting to the reality of this hormonal shift, as opposed to just clamoring for, like, let me just try to have the kind of estrogen levels I had 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's just actually not sustainable. So if you're really having a hard time, I would say, talk to a more holistic practitioner that can look at the whole of what's happening and see where your body is in need of more support and how to meet that need in a more sustainable way. And if you find that you're really in a crisis where it's compromising your mental health or your quality of life, then a very low dose of hormone replacement therapy might be a short term fix. But again, your gut has to then process that, your liver has to process that. So you still have to do the work so that you even benefit from any kind of hormone replacement therapy if that's the route you choose.
Okay, so we have one last. Do we have any more questions? Let me see.
She talked about support systems. We could wrap up. I know we're coming at time. So
Yes.
if you want to talk about the psychosocial impacts and support systems, you want to conclude with that?
Or maybe just you kind of
Evidence
covered a
based.
lot of it.
Okay.
Um, evidence-based approaches to maintaining health during these transitions. You covered that um,
Where you
with
how you
the
want to wrap
acupuncturist
it?
briefly. Um, and actual that the type of practitioners that you should go or you advise that you ought to try before just like taking your doctor's word for it and learning yourself. So I think you pretty much, I don't want to have you being redundant, but you can feel free to add anything that you may want to at this point.
I'll just conclude with this, that how we think about, much like periods, how we think about our periods set us up for different expectations. And I think similarly, how we think about perimenopause and menopause will impact our expectation of what we experience and even our optimism and our curiosity about it. If you've only heard bad things and you're just kind of bracing yourself for the worst. But I think it's worthwhile to note that in many indigenous cultures, menopause was something that was looked forward to because it was the bridge, it was the initiation into how you are going to step into spiritual leadership, how you're going to step into community leadership for people, especially in cultures that recognize like shamanism and spiritual healing. They would say, yeah, menopause is that gateway into that spiritual leadership and ability to be a spiritual healer in the community. So it was a way that people were stepping into a new role, right? Even moving away from those childbearing years, it's a different level of availability in your relationship to your community when you're not as in the thick of raising young children, right? So I think that perspective is seeing menopause as a rite of passage, it's an initiation, it's an entering into another beautiful stage of life. And then if we have more intergenerational friendships and relationships, then we constantly see women cycling through these different stages and we don't have as much fear and ignorance. We realize, oh, okay, well, these elders around me, how are they moving? How are they caring for themselves? How do I prepare for what's ahead? It's also quite common for women to need time alone, right? Some talk about having a menopause retreat or a sabbatical.
Ooh, let's do
Or
it. Let's do it.
but I mean like a more like a sabbatical, like I'm
Yes,
stepping away for like
yes.
a year or two.
Oh, okay.
Not in total isolation, obviously, but for some women, it's like, look, there's an inner work that I'm being called to do, and I need to give time to that. I need to tend to that. So I think that's really important too, is listening to what's happening.
They're talking about joint pain in the comments, and I experienced what I was diagnosed as tendonitis, and I truly appreciate um,
The collagen, I saw
a
the collagen.
collagen recommendation. Thank you.
Collagen is great for the gut as well. And again, however you haven't been nourishing yourself very deeply, again, this is the invitation, right? Looking at your mineral health, looking at your gut health, looking at your nervous system health. What are the practices that help you feel safe and grounded and you're not in that fatigue, burnout state? If you're having difficulty sleeping at night, what space is there for you to sleep when sleep comes? I knew a very dear elder to me, and she said, I'm at a space now where I don't have to keep pushing myself. I just sleep when I'm tired. And if I have energy at night, I'm going to do what I need. Like sometimes it's our culture and our lifestyle that's getting in the way of what our body's new rhythm is calling us to do. So maybe the 9 to 5 on someone else's time can't work for you because you're not sleeping at night. So maybe it's time to pivot into another type of service, another type of work when you can sleep when you need to sleep and you can be up when you need to be up and you're not gunning in the same way you used to. So, you have to consider one writer I interviewed about menopause. She said, coming into menopause is like the shifting of tectonic plates. The things that were underneath are going to come to surface. So your poor boundaries, your poor diet, your poor communication skills. Um, what's been under the surface is going to come up now. And that can be really hard to face in your personal life, in your family life, in your community life. And let people hold you through that journey. Find your sisters, find your circle of women who can really call you into your purpose, remind you when things get tough. It's not meant to be gone through alone, and there's no rite of passage that we're meant to do alone. We're all rites of passage are meant to be held in community. Yes, it's your personal path, but the community traditionally was always on the other side, holding you, welcoming you, receiving you.
That's good stuff. All of that was just really, really key for me. Um, so it was reiterating,
Mm.
actually, when I say key. Okay, well, I don't think we have any other questions. I checked Facebook.
Now it's time to tell us what's happening next month.
So yeah, okay, would you I was gonna let you share first, like how
No, you
people
go.
can
You go.
reach you. So next month I am hosting an in-person with a lot of other women that are helping, partnering, and sponsoring. Sister Chantal actually sponsored the event by just giving her knowledge, her experience, and her expertise here. We're going to have an in-person perimenopause and menopause workshop. Excuse me. I don't know why it's a tongue tie for me saying those. In Laurel, Maryland. And it's the capacity of 40 women only. We'll have a light lunch. We'll have a mental health therapist, clinician, licensed clinical social worker from the county's health department. We'll have a yoga session for 30 minutes that is going to be specific to womb. And we'll have also a yoga, not a session, but a therapist, a certified yoga therapist who will come and speak specifically to the seniors. And then I have a co-host, Mom Network, who will also be there the first half, first 30 minutes, and will bring a wealth of knowledge as it relates to perimenopause and menopause as well. And so we're just going to have materials, we'll have supplements. I need to get mint tea because I was like, dandelion, milk thistle. Um, I need to grab a probiotic too, as well, because I was just, going to share things that help me so far. My nurse practitioner, someone asked, how do you know which, or do you, about the hormone, um, testing? How do which hormones to get to? I prefer a nurse practitioner for my primary care, and my nurse practitioner is just excellent with women's health, in my opinion. And she was able to check my hormones, and that they can do that through your blood, and get a count. And so I just started taking things that were suggested to me as supplements, and it worked for me so far. But there's a ton of different variations of supplements and herbs that help. And I think just, we're going to get a feel for, like, I'll share what works for me, and we're going to feel for what can work overall, but everyone's uniquely designed, and it's going to be different for everyone. So, and we're just going to have a good time. We're going to use that opportunity to come together and have our rites of passage for what we're dealing with in our journeys. And even if you're not in perimenopause, or menopause, it's a workshop that is being used as a tool to help us, to be informed and help in the preparation process as well. There may be people that are just in the room that can give testimonials to their experiences. And that can just help, so that it's like I almost landed here. When you land here, when you land in this space, as I am in perimenopause, you kind of like can reflect back on conversations that you had and what you learned from today in that room on May 31st. Excuse me, I don't know if I said the date. Um, and kind of, oh, okay, I see, and then you just kind of like journey into finding your way, what works best for you. And that's the hopes of the workshop, is to just give as much information as possible. And we have a holistic lifestyle. She's not a coach, but she's a female who lives a holistic lifestyle. She's going to make a juice. And so we're going to have, taste tests and, good food, and just nice time with women. So that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And for those of you who can't be there, who are not in the region, if you signed up for today's webinar, we'll be sending you an email of how you can access a free class that I offer called The Gifts of Perimenopause and Menopause, because we get told all the bad stuff, all of the negative stuff. So this kind of is a challenge to that, to realize what opportunity is presenting itself to you in this beautiful autumn, leading into our second spring of life after menopause. And so how we can approach it with that kind of optimism. And when you enjoy that free class, you also will be added to a wait list. I offer a group coaching program called Peaceful Perimenopause that will begin in the fall, and you'll have the first opportunity to join if that interests you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sister Chantal, for giving your time and your expertise. And will the workshop be online? Angela was asking. No, Angela, this workshop will be in person only. And it's because we want it to be an intimate space. So, we can ask the questions that we may not want to ask online, and get those answers, in a direct manner. We're not going to put all of that out there on the internet, um, or, just, we're not going to record any of that.
But today will be, I see Hadia's question, will today be recorded? So yeah, you'll be able to watch it at a later time. And thank you all for your encouraging words and your positive messages. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jazakallah Khairan. From like,